Hi guys, I'm back, and this time I'm going to be continuing our notes with completing the square. So this is part 3 of our notes. So we're going to talk this time about an example where you have a coefficient that's greater than 1 in front of your x squared. So you might encounter those on your homework. So I'm going to give an example. So let's write down 2x squared minus 10x. Minus 10x minus 3 equals 0. Okay, and we're going to start it the same way that we always do. We're going to first remove our constant. So our constant here is negative 3. So we're going to add 3 to both sides, like you always do. That's going to cancel, and we're left with 2x squared minus 10x, we're going to leave a space, equals 3. Okay, now the only thing that's different now is you're going to look at this coefficient in front of x squared, and it's a 2, right? So what you're going to do to get rid of the 2 is you're going to divide every term by 2. So let's do that. So let's divide this by 2, this term by 2, and over here even we have to divide by 2. Everything has to be divided by this number that's in front of the in front of the variable. Okay, so now we are left with, because if we were to cancel 2 divided by 2 becomes 1, now we're left with x squared minus 10 divided by 2 is 5x. And we're going to still have that space. And here we have a fraction, so we have 3 divided by 2. So don't be afraid of that fraction. We're going to tackle it. Okay, so now we're going to go back and do the same thing that we were doing before, because now it looks like we were used to it. It looks like an x squared without it just has the coefficient of 1. So it looks like we're used to. So remember, our next step is we need to add something here, and the same thing we need to add over here, remember? So we have to look at this number, the coefficient in front of x again, and remember it's going to be that number, so it's negative 5 divided by 2, and this time we're going to square it. Remember, it's this number in front of the x divided by 2, and then you square that. So let's simplify this. So we have negative 5 times negative 5, which is going to be 25 over 4. So let me just review that again. So that's negative 5 over 2 times negative 5 over 2, which equaled 25 over 4. Okay, and so we're going to put the 25 over 4 here. The same thing we do here, we need to do over here to keep our equation balanced. Now, remember that once we get here, we need to have the 2, we need to have one parenthesis, and we need to square that. And then we're going to put our equal sign, and we're going to simplify over here. Now, if you remember, these don't have common denominators, so we're going to have to make it so they have a common denominator. So we're going to have 3/2 plus 25 over 4. Remember, we need the same denominator. So we would change this into 4. This is going to stay 4. So 4 goes into 4 one time. 1 goes into 25 times. 2 goes into 4 2 times. 2 times 3 is 6. So now we have the same denominator. Remember, we keep the denominator 4, and we add 25 plus 6, which is 31, right? So we changed our fraction here to 31 over 4. Okay, good. So now we're going to come back over here. Now we know we need an x squared, so this is going to be x. And remember, in order to get this number right here, we take our middle term, which is negative 5, and we divide it by 2. We do not square it this time, but we're left with negative 5/2. Right? So we leave that right there. Now, we're not finished, because remember, we need to get x by itself. So we're going to take the square root of both sides, And remember from our previous video that when we take the square root of this term inside here, okay, it just comes out. So it's going to be x minus 5 over 2 equals the square root of 31 over 4. But remember, this is going to be plus or minus. Again, look back at part 2's notes that every time we square a radical, we're always going to get two solutions, plus and minus. Okay, so now we are left with x minus 5 over 2, oops, equals, let me sharpen my pencil really quickly. Oh, nope, I can't do that. My sharpener is not working. So we get x minus 5 over 2 equals plus, equals plus or minus the square root of 31 over 4. And we want to add 5 halves, that'd be 5 over 2 to both sides. So now we're going to get x equals plus or minus the square root of 31 over 4 plus 5 over 2. All right, and now let's break that down. Well, actually, we could just go like this. We could say, well, 5 halves plus, and you could just take the square root of 31 over the square root of 4, which is just going to be 2. All right, and now we're just going to keep our denominator 2, and we're going to say 5 plus or minus the square root of 31 is our answer. Now, I know that might have seemed kind of confusing at some point, but just remember that when we have a radical, when we're squaring a fraction of a radical, we're going to take the square root of 31 over the square root of 4. So really, right here, this became the square root of 31 over the square root of 4. And that's how we got the square root of 31 we can't break down. But we can break down the square root of 4 into 2. So that's how we got 5 halves plus the square root of 31 over 2. Okay, so there's our answer right there. So just to recap, remember whenever you have a number that's greater than 1 in front of your x squared, you have to divide every term by that same number in order to cancel it. Okay, so there you go. Make sure you get that in your notes. Bye.